Are you the person who has tried everything to fix your gut, but you're still struggling with bloating after meals, digestion that feels sluggish one week and fine the next? You might have random food sensitivities that are never consistent. If that's you, you might be treating the wrong problem. And before you exit out of this and tell me that you don't have digestive issues, I want to ask you this. How many bowel movements a day are you having? And if you're having just one, you have digestive issues. Now, maybe you're having two or three, but they're inconsistent or the texture changes. It goes from diarrhea some days, and then maybe every once in a while you get constipation. You also have signs of digestive issues. We are going to spend the next couple of episodes diving into some of the root causes of these symptoms. And along the way, we are going to discover what conditions these symptoms may be contributing to as well. So today we are breaking down the difference between SIBO and dysbiosis. Okay, this is a big topic. Two gut issues that look similar on the surface, but require totally different strategies to fix. Welcome to the Even You Can Get Well podcast. I am your host, Felishia Desjardins. I am also your holistic health practitioner. I'm a certified holistic nutritional consultant, registered bioenergetic practitioner, and thyroid success coach for the brilliant Dr. Rochelle Vong. And if you are in the Carstairs, Olds, Cochrane, Didsbury area in Alberta, you have access to me as your holistic health practitioner. But for those listening all around the world, I want to bring my protocols to life for you. I want to bring holistic health to life for you. We've really been conditioned today to believe that we don't know enough to take charge of our own health. And I think somewhere along the way, we lost trust in our intuition and started outsourcing what our bodies have been trying to tell us. So, of course, I want you to seek professional help. That's what I do. But I believe the purpose of every holistic health practitioner isn't to make you dependent. It's to reinstill that confidence, to help you tap into your tuition again, and then support and give you the tools to know how to address the issues your body has been warning you about. So are you ready for some real life tools today? Let's dive in. So what is dysbiosis? Let's sum up dysbiosis. It is an imbalance in the gut microbiome, and I want you to think large intestine, okay? Now, what does that mean? Your large intestine houses all of your good gut bacteria, but there are also some other bacteria there as well. So listen, we are a collection of dirt, bugs, and water. That's what makes us healthy. But dysbiosis is when there are too many harmful microbes in the large intestine and not enough beneficial ones. Now, really helpful here, I don't know if you're listening in a car or what you're doing at the moment, but if you were able to pull up just a general diagram of, the digestive system. Let's put this simply. I'm just going to focus on these three parts. You have your stomach, leads into your small intestine, leads into your large intestine, okay? So dysbiosis, we are talking about that bottom half, that large intestine at the bottom, okay? That's connected to your anus. That is where your bowel is, the poop is coming out of, okay? So what are some causes of dysbiosis? You might have dysbiosis. You might have heard of dysbiosis. You might have been told that you have it, whatever. And you've probably heard about leaky gut. There's a connection here. But causes of dysbiosis, number one, stress. More and more as I practice, this is what I am seeing, is that we are very stressed out today. We are running on adrenaline. Our adrenals are just shot or struggling. And stress is, it's become chronic in our world today. And when we have chronic cortisol, that creates inflammation, and that directly affects the gut. Okay. Antibiotics. Antibiotics is another big one, big cause of dysbiosis. Poor diet, low fiber, hormonal changes. And this can go both ways. You can also have dysbiosis that leads to hormonal changes, or your hormonal changes could affect your microbiome. Chronic inflammation. So again, to connect back to that cortisol piece. But I do want to make that connection there. And when I say stress, a lot of the times people think, well, I'm not a generally stressed out person. That's great. But I want you to think about not just, okay, I'm very stressed, but stressed on a physiological level. So what inflammatory processes are happening in your body that is stressing your physiology? The other thing I want you to think about in terms of stress is, okay, you might not feel super stressed out, but how busy are you? What's your sleep like? What's your downtime like? What's the period in your life where you get to process stress? Is there a period there? Do you allow your nervous system to get into the rest and digest state? Or are you constantly on the go? Okay. Deeper immune imbalances are also going to be a culprit here. Low stomach acid as well. This is huge. This is a big starting point for me with a lot of people is, okay, how's your digestive function in general? Do you have low stomach acid? That's such a common symptom that I see. So dysbiosis, it's often a foundational issue behind other gut imbalances like candida, leaky gut, and sometimes even SIBO. And again, like we talked about, it's even a foundational issue oftentimes behind thyroid issues, behind hormone imbalances. Definitely a big connection if you were having joint pain or nerve pain, maybe down your arms, maybe down your legs, or you're just getting achy joints. Dysbiosis is something that you need to look into. You need to get on top of your gut health, and you will watch, majority of people, you will watch your joint pain improve. So symptoms of dysbiosis, what does this look like? Irregular bowel movements, okay, constipation or maybe loose stool. It can go either way, and it can maybe sometimes fluctuate, but usually it goes either way. Fatigue, brain fog. This is absolutely a very common thing that I see. And along with fatigue and brain fog, you will often get depression and anxiety. This is such an important topic to discuss, and I see this too often, that people are being diagnosed with anxiety or depression and they're being put on medications that further disrupt their gut and in the long term makes their anxiety and depression worse. No problem if you need to go on medications at some point, but dysbiosis, gut health, needs to be addressed first. There are holistic paths that need to be investigated, I think, before medication comes in. So really important if you're struggling with anxiety or depression or you know someone, let's look at dysbiosis. Let's look at your gut health. Food sensitivities are going to be another symptom here. Skin issues, eczema, acne. This is your red flag. You need to support your gut health, your liver health, eliminating those toxins, because now those toxins are trying to come out of your skin and it's expressing as eczema or acne. Like I had mentioned before, joint pain, nerve pain, hormone imbalance, absolute common symptoms of dysbiosis. So to give you a visual, when I say dysbiosis, I want you to think of a neglected garden, okay? This is the weeds have taken over, the flowers die off, and everything's a little bit of a mess. That's your large intestine, that's your gut in dysbiosis. Now, let's do that versus SIBO. So we have dysbiosis, we know what that is. What is SIBO? So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Bacteria that normally live in the large intestine migrate up into the small intestine. Now, the small intestine should be relatively sterile. It's meant for nutrient absorption, right? You eat the food, it goes into your stomach, hydrochloric acid breaks it down along with some enzymes, but mainly hydrochloric acid. Then it's going into your small intestine. That's where your nutrients are getting absorbed, among other things. It is not the place for fermentation, okay? So you don't want a number of bacteria in the small intestine. It should be relatively sterile. Now, there are 3 different types of SIBO, and this is going to come more into play when we talk about symptoms, and then again when we just discuss testing. But there's methane dominant, there's hydrogen dominant, and then there's hydrogen sulfide. Now, what are some of the causes of SIBO? Food poisoning. Viruses, that can be a big cause. Gut motility damage. There is something called a migrating motor complex that you have. And in certain traumas, in certain infections, life situations, when that vagal tone is turned down, your migrating motor complex can downregulate, so to speak. And that means you're getting a backup of the bacteria that is supposed to live in the large intestine going up into the small intestine. And that's when we have SIBO. I said gut motility damage, so this can also be like post-viral, post-travel, maybe even post-surgery. That can also be a cause. Chronic stress, again, or hypothyroidism, it slows motility, it's slowing that migrating motor complex. Adhesions or anatomical issues. Sometimes this is a real thing, even going in and checking with a chiro or an osteo to see, is there something anatomical here that's blocking my motility? Long-term proton pump inhibitor, okay? Your antacids here. And this can contribute to dysbiosis as well. But when we are over time chronically reducing the level of acid in our stomach, we are going to run into problems in the future. Okay, we need stomach acid in order to digest our food. And really common, the more often than not, the cause of acid reflux and indigestion is that you don't have enough stomach acid. And taking a Tums is just masking symptoms. So we have the pyloric sphincter in our stomach at the top that is like a flap that keeps your stomach acid from going up into your esophagus. But your stomach acid, the right amount of stomach acid, is actually what triggers that sphincter to close. If you do not have enough stomach acid, that sphincter will not close and you will get a backup of acid into the esophagus, creating acid reflux. Okay, so Tums here are not helping you, and they can contribute to slow motility. So what are the symptoms of SIBO? This is where we'll get into a little bit of a distinction here. Bloating. Now, you're going to experience some bloating and dysbiosis, most likely. But bloating in SIBO is slightly different. So this is the person that every time they eat a carbohydrate especially, they are getting bloated. You might also be the person, if you have SIBO, that you wake up bloated or you bloat just upon drinking water, okay? So bloating is a really big part of the picture for SIBO. Now, the carbohydrate is important to talk about because carbohydrates obviously break down into glucose, and that is sugar that feeds SIBO. So it feeds those bacteria in your small intestine. That's why you get that bloating after carbohydrates. You might be the person that if you went on a strict keto or carnivore diet, you might improve a bit. You might not experience bloating anymore because you're no longer feeding the bacteria there. That could be you. Now, we don't want to stay on keto or carnivore for long periods of time. I don't recommend strict diets like that for long periods. They can be good therapeutic tools. But if there is a reason that you are struggling with breaking down and digesting carbohydrates, we need to correct that. We need to solve that. So along with that, some other symptoms: gas, burping, it might be excessive, abdominal pain when the bloating gets really intense. Nutrient deficiencies. This could be hit or miss, but absolutely, because the bacteria in the small intestine is blocking, so to speak, some of the nutrient absorption, you might see B12 or iron deficiencies or lower fat soluble vitamins. So your vitamin D, your vitamin A, those things might be low in blood work. That's a sign. Now, oftentimes they break down a SIBO into methane versus hydrogen. And often people will say methane dominant creates constipation, hydrogen dominant creates diarrhea. Okay, but not always the case. So understand, a lot of times in SIBO, you will actually see either just a chronic case of constipation, or you might see an alternating between constipation and diarrhea. Now, analogy. So when we talked about that dysbiosis, we talked about that overgrown garden. Here, I want you to imagine that your plumbing is backed up. Bacteria from the sewer, large intestine, has moved into your kitchen pipes, your small intestine. Okay, that's the visual I want you to keep in mind. Now let's chat about testing and identifying SIBO versus dysbiosis, and then we'll jump into treatment approaches. So some gold standard testing for SIBO. Let's start with SIBO. This is going to be a lactulose or glucose breath test, a 3-hour test. So Lactulose is going to be the one that you want to go with. It is more accurate. It reaches further down the small intestine and triggers the bacteria. Glucose doesn't always reach the whole of the small intestine, so you might get some false results. Now, it's also important to remember that different bacteria feed on different things. So these tests are not always 100% accurate. You have to take into account symptom pictures. So if I had a client who tested negative but suffered from extreme bloating after eating carbohydrates and dealt with maybe an alternation between constipation and diarrhea, first I would maybe run a secondary GI test to see what's happening in the large intestine to look at dysbiosis and other things. But I would likely still utilize a SIBO protocol to cover the bases and see how the client responds. Okay, so either way, a SIBO protocol is going to be a benefit for someone with any level of dysbiosis as well. Now, these types of tests can be ordered from different labs. Personally, I use a company called Felishia and will often use a Genova SIBO test, 3-hour test. Some additional markers like we talked about when we talked about nutrient deficiencies. We're going to look at B12, look at folate, look at fat-soluble vitamins in your blood work. Are those low? Are we seeing some malabsorption? That might be another good reason to run a SIBO test. Now for dysbiosis. So dysbiosis, again, this is large intestine. So we are looking at a comprehensive stool test. The favorite one is the GI 360. Okay, it has the microbiology part and the PCR testing. So this looks at beneficial versus pathogenic bacteria, short-chain fatty acids, yeast, parasites, inflammation, and digestive markers. This is such a neat test and such a helpful test to use. So we're going to talk about treatment approaches here, and that will come into play. The comprehensive stool test really gives you so much insight to help you through your treatment approach start to finish. So for dysbiosis, a comprehensive stool test is the way to go. Now, let's get into treatment approaches. So for either SIBO or dysbiosis, the goal is to understand what the root cause was. Okay, I want to highlight that. Were you going through an incredibly stressful period in life? Have you been eating a poor diet? Have you had surgery or a past viral infection? These things matter, and the root has to be addressed alongside the SIBO or dysbiosis protocol, whatever you're going to run. So listen, if there are lifestyle and diet changes that need to happen and you aren't committed to making those changes, you're going to waste time and energy on supplements because the issue will come back. So I want to stress this because this is something that I see a lot of people struggle with. And I get it. It's hard to make changes. But it is not, at the end of the day, freedom to eat whatever you want or not correct stress or sleep patterns, only to end up struggling with your health all the time. It is freedom when you are committed to learning new ways of living, and the result is you thriving in energy, health, work, and relationships. Okay? Thriving in health and well-being is freedom. Now let's focus on what you are all probably very interested in is what are the treatment approaches for SIBO? What's the treatment approach for dysbiosis? So let's start with SIBO. Phase 1 is going to be starving, and this is actually going to be the same phase for both of these. So removing processed foods, excess sugar, inflammatory oils, and that will help you starve out some of the organisms that are in the small intestine that shouldn't be there. And for dysbiosis, that's going to help you starve out dysbiotic or pathogenic bacteria that have overtaken the good bacteria. So removing those food sources. Again, this is such a big part of the protocol, and we can't skip this step, okay? If you're going through this, if you're going through gut issues, you cannot skip the step of cleaning up your nutrition, removing the processed sugar, okay? I'm not talking about natural sugars, processed sugar. Now, when we're talking about SIBO, there is sometimes a need to be a little bit more strict with our sugar intake, even our natural sugars. Now, I wouldn't say I'm as strict as most. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with SIBO protocols that are very strict. You're only eating almost, proteins and and some vegetables. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that, and some of you might have gone through that before. And it's hit or miss. It's depending on where you are at. So I am always thinking in the long term. I'm always thinking about long-term changes to support your overall health and your long-term well-being. And in that, the more realistic we can make this, the better. Now, we usually go in 4-week increments with SIBO. Okay, so you will start a biofilm and a antimicrobial protocol. Within 4 weeks, you should see noticeable change. And if you're not, you need to switch things up. So by all means, starting that 4 weeks off by not only cutting out the processed and the inflammatory oils and those bad things that we should all be cutting out, but also in those 4 weeks limiting even your fruit intake and then starchy carbohydrates like potatoes, that's going to be really helpful for you. So step 1, phase 1, starving out. You need to remove the bad. And for those 4 weeks, I would suggest limiting, not totally necessarily getting rid of. There's some takes on that, and it's depending on where you're at, but at least limiting fruits, starchy carbs. Phase 2, this is going to be biofilm. So this goes alongside of phase 3, which is your antimicrobials, but this is often a step that's overlooked. So bacteria produce biofilm. It is a protective barrier that needs to be destroyed, but it's a protective barrier that they produce to basically hide themselves. So to give you a picture of this, if you think about your toilet bowl, if you haven't cleaned your toilet bowl for a while, you get that ring inside, right? And despite the water flushing down on it, it's not being removed. It's not going away. That's because it is a protective barrier, a biofilm that the organisms are able to hide and thrive under. This can occur in your body. And for those people who have had SIBO for a very long time, this is going to be especially important for you because there is going to be biofilm production and you need to slowly chip away at that. So there are products made specifically for biofilms, biofilm busters, advanced phase 2 is a common one. And it's very neat to see people go through this. And if you've experienced this, or if you're going to be looking into a SIBO protocol, bringing on a biofilm product, you might experience changes upon taking it, but you also might experience different changes a month or 2 months down the road because that biofilm is slowly getting deeper and deeper and eating more and more of that biofilm, which means you have access to more of the organisms and the bacteria that have been, and maybe even the viruses that have been hiding underneath that biofilm. So addressing biofilm, bringing on something for biofilm is a big part of the protocol. That is phase 2. Phase 3 is antimicrobials. So these are going to be your herbals a lot of the time, if we're doing this naturally, which I am. Oregano, berberine, garlic, those types of things. Okay. Phase 4 is repairing. So we talked about that migrating motor complex. So this looks a little bit different than the repair work that we're going to do in dysbiosis, although there can be some overlap. But repair here is really focused on the motility. So migrating motor complex motility, getting that working again. You can do that through herbals. You can also, one of the most effective ways to do this is through increasing vagal tone. So for the osteopaths out there, they're going to love this. Increasing vagal tone will stimulate and support proper digestive function and movement or motility. So a really neat trick that I like to have people do is holding an ice pack under your neck. So if you think about under your jawline on your neck, you're going to hold an ice pack on each side, 5 minutes each side. You're going to do that 3 times a day. So there's lots of studies actually done with TENS units, and they put a TENS, I don't even know what you would call that, but almost like a little TENS earpiece in the left ear. I think it's 3 times a day for 15 minutes, is if I'm remembering that study correctly. And that was very effective at stimulating vagal tone. So increasing vagal tone, turning the migrating motor complex back on. That's phase 4. Phase 5, rebalance. So we think about slowly reintroducing fibers, maybe reintroducing some fruits. maybe rebuilding microbiome diversity if that is applicable here as well. So dysbiosis, let's move into treatment approaches for dysbiosis. Like we said, phase 1 is going to be the same, starving out, removing processed items, removing processed sugar. Phase 2, very similar, is going to be clearing. So these are your antimicrobials. Sometimes biofilm work is needed here, and that's something to look at, but not quite the same as SIBO. So usually we're skipping right to antimicrobials. Again, berberine can be very helpful, garlic, lots of different herbs that can be used, lots of different supplement complexes that are good out there for dysbiosis cleaning. Phase 3, restoring function. So a little bit different than SIBO, but similar concept. Alongside of your antimicrobial protocol, you usually need to support digestive function. I do this with almost everybody on some level. So promoting bile flow, proper stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes. All levels of digestion need to be supported. So are you digesting proteins, fats, and carbohydrates effectively? There's different components used to digest each of those. So we think enzymes are usually for carbohydrates. Bile is for our fat. Acid is for our protein. A lot of people make the mistake of just supplementing with enzymes, but they're not doing anything to support fat and protein digestion in a more roundabout way, or in a more in-depth way, I should say. So that is very important. I like to use a full spectrum enzyme a lot of the times that has hydrochloric acid and maybe some ox bile in it, depending on the person. And a really simple trick is just to turn digestive function on or improve it is apple cider vinegar, a shot of it, a teaspoon to a tablespoon, 10 minutes before your breakfast and dinner. Try that out. That's a really easy thing for a lot of people to do, and most people will experience a benefit. Phase 4 is going to be the healing. So like I said, a little bit different from SIBO, but the healing phase here refers to working on the gut lining. So this is where you think about your L-glutamine, your marshmallow roots, your aloe vera. We are looking at supporting the epithelial lining in the gut. We are looking at proper mucus secretion to protect that gut. Perilla is a really great herb for this. So healing, repairing gut lining, whether you have leaky gut or not, I think is a very important step in dysbiosis. Phase 5 is replenishing. This is actually where a lot of people usually start, and it's sometimes surprising to me that we talk about dysbiosis or gut issues and we immediately go to get a probiotic. This is usually my last step for people. Now that's going to depend, right? Everybody's a little bit different, but for the most part, all of that clean out work, all of that nutrition work, all of the restoring digestive function, that should be done first. And replenishing probiotics comes near the end. Now I'm going to connect this back as well to the comprehensive stool test that I talked about. So I chatted about the stool test gives you everything you kind of need from start to finish. So it's showing you what dysbiotic or pathogenic bacteria that you might have in your gut, which helps you to understand how to properly clear it. Depending on the organism, you might use a certain herb. And it also, very neat, the GI 360 will take certain herbs or take certain supplements, caprylic acid, uvauracil, things like that, and they'll test that to your stool and see which product actually did the best at clearing the organisms found in your stool. That's a huge help when choosing, specific herbs or specific products to help you overcome your dysbiosis. But it also shows what probiotics, what commensal or good bacteria you might be low in. So when it comes to that end phase, that phase 5, usually, and we're looking at bringing in probiotics, we can go back to your GI 360 and say, oh, okay, your lactobacillus was actually low. Let's choose something with lactobacillus, right? So it takes the guessing game out of it and gives you specifics to your body what you're needing. So a key message here, SIBO often needs a targeted phased approach. Dysbiosis healing is more foundational. think long-term nourishment and rebuilding. Now, really, when I say that, both of them are going to be long-term nourishment and rebuilding, just in different ways. So I just want to quickly highlight some of the differences that we talked about so that we have this clear in our mind. Okay, so if you're wondering which you're dealing with, SIBO is the small intestine, dysbiosis is the large intestine. The main symptoms of SIBO: bloating immediately after eating carbs. You're the person who is waking up bloated, bloats from drinking water. You are maybe alternating between constipation and diarrhea, excessive gas, fatigue, and nutrient deficiencies. Dysbiosis, your symptoms are going to be irregular bowel movements, food sensitivities, some bloating, maybe discomfort, joint pain or nerve issues, inflammation, you're puffy, hormone imbalances, skin issues, mood issues, brain fog, achy joints, and allergies. So quite the broad picture there. We talked about different gases in SIBO, so hydrogen, methane, hydrogen sulfide. Common causes of SIBO, like we talked about, motility issues, post-infection, chronic dysbiosis can be a part of it. And then dysbiosis, antibiotics, diet, stress, low fiber, low stomach acid. And of course, stress and inflammation is going to be a big contributor to SIBO as well. So when do they overlap? It is common to have both. Okay, many people treat dysbiosis but still have SIBO symptoms, or clear SIBO but never rebuild their microbiome. So it is often important to check for both, but sequence does matter. So addressing SIBO first is going to be really important, and then restoring balance and microbiome diversity. Okay, now it's not always the case that you have both. I recently am working with a client who we were sure there was maybe some dysbiosis, lots of gut issues, did the comprehensive stool test, looks great. That's now leading us to think, okay, we have to address potentially SIBO. Let's look into that. So you can have them together, but you might just have one. When to seek help? If you've had symptoms for over 3 months, or multiple food sensitivities, or your digestion worsens after antibiotics or restrictive diets, that's very common. Yeah, you're going to want to get help. So, and again, there's so many symptoms, especially with dysbiosis that I listed: hormonal imbalance, achy joints, anxiety, depression. I really, really think that for everybody, if you're struggling with your health, gut needs to be part of the program somewhere along the way. Okay, if we're not addressing the gut in your healing protocols, there's an issue there. Okay, and again, the right testing is going to be really important, because you might do, like this client that I'm working with now, you might do the GI test and find that it's actually really great. And that gives you a lot of insight. Okay, we might not need to focus so much on that large intestine, but let's look at the small intestine. Let's look at digestive function. What about stomach acid levels, like we talked about? Getting the proper help, proper testing, and learning to listen to your intuition again. You know when there's something going on with your body. You know when there's something going on with your gut for the most part. Listen to that. The root cause of healing your gut isn't just about killing bacteria. It's about restoring balance. It's about repairing the gut lining. It's about long-term lifestyle and nutritional changes to prevent the issue from reoccurring. So if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who's struggling with gut issues. And if you want to go deeper into testing your protocols, you can book a session with me and just get into contact with me if you have further questions. If you've been following this podcast, you know that I have a Facebook group where I post additional info. Maybe if there's notes that I include with the podcast. My last podcast was on adrenal dysfunction, and there's a great PDF tool for you in the Facebook group. So go ahead and join the Facebook group. Even You Can Get Well on Facebook. Even You Can Get Well on Instagram. Connect with me. I've said it before in the last podcast. I want this to be your podcast, a place that you can go to ask questions, to understand more about your health, to be empowered in your healing journey. Many of you will know my story of battling with chronic illness and Lyme disease as it was diagnosed back then for almost a decade. I've been through it. I know the suffering. I know the struggling. I know the isolation. I know the confusion of where to turn. And that's why I do this. So you can get well. That's why it's called Even You. Even you, just like me, can get well. So I hope this episode sheds a little bit of light. If you're having digestive issues, if you're having hormonal issues, if you're having allergies, if you're having achy joints or anxiety and depression, if you have that friend who's struggling with anxiety and depression and you know it's deeper, share this episode with them. They need to hear it. So dysbiosis, SIBO, two very common issues that need to be addressed. I hope you feel empowered in this. Join in the conversation. Again, make this podcast your own. Even you can get well on Instagram. I often go on and give you the opportunity to ask questions and even submit requests for podcast topics. So for the next little bit, I am going to stick with this theme of SIBO, dysbiosis, gut, nutrition. Like I talked about, we're going to look at root causes here and dive in even deeper. So thanks for listening, everyone. And I will see you in the next podcast. Bye, everyone.